Thomas Paine was a member of the Lunar Society. Benjamin Franklin would go and meet with them, yeah. Anyway, he recognized in Thomas Paine that the fellow was, he was pretty good at writing. And so he brought him back with him to Philadelphia. And he wrote the pamphlets that started the revolution in America. It was a little booklet called Common Sense. Thomas Paine wrote that. And it was kind of inciting people to war against King George III.
With the help of Paine and his fellow Masons, Franklin worked to create the revolutionary mentality among the colonies.
Yes, Franklin developed the concept of the virtuous revolution. The thought of revolting against a monarch amongst European people was absolutely anathema. It went totally against the European mindset of the divine right of kings, where government is of God, kings are appointed by God, and so the virtuous revolution was something really different.
But not all Masons went along with Franklin's ideas, like the man known as the Great American Trader, Benedict Arnold, also a Mason who chose to side with the British during the war. Nevertheless, for good or for ill, Masonry was clearly at the helm of the War of Independence. It seems ironic, however, that American Masonry today owes its allegiance to the very country it rebelled against. Modern Masons trace their official beginning to the United Grand Lodge of England, founded in 1717.
The official start of modern Masonry is in 1717 in the Apple Tree Tavern in London, where the first Grand Lodge of England was convened. And that's called the Mother Lodge, because essentially all English-speaking lodges precipitate out of that. And for example, all American lodges, all the different Grand Lodges of the different states, all ultimately owe their allegiance and their warrant to the Grand Lodge of England.
Yet prior to the formation of the Grand Lodge, the seeds of modern Masonry had already been sown through the work of Francis Bacon.
Francis Bacon established the Masonic organization, that whole body that was established by Francis Bacon. The ethical programs that were inherent within that, he was responsible for all those. His philosophy, his ethics, his literature that he was responsible for would certainly be known to Benjamin Franklin.
Was Franklin following Bacon's plan? Was it mere coincidence that he was a chief catalyst in the launching of the American Revolution? Or that his influence would also bring about the revolution in France? Masonic philosopher Manly P. Hall wrote that not only were many American founders Masons, but they received aid from a secret and august body existing in Europe, which helped them to establish this country for a peculiar and particular purpose, known only to the initiated few. Hall further suggests that Benjamin Franklin was among those few. In his book, The Secret Destiny of America, Hall writes of Franklin's involvement with the plan of Francis Bacon. In Chapter 13, titled Bacon's Secret Society Set Up in America, Hall features an illustration showing the eastern seaboard with Benjamin Franklin overseeing it, while beside him is the shadow of Bacon. Hall claims that Franklin spoke for the secret societies and that most of the men who worked with him in the early days of the American Revolution were also members. He says, quote, "The plan was working out. The new Atlantis was coming into being in accordance with the program laid down by Francis Bacon." To those who have studied him, Sir Francis Bacon is one of the most enigmatic figures in world history. Baconian societies have existed for centuries since his death in 1626. All of them credit Bacon with the great advancements of the New World.
Bacon is such an interesting character, such a complex character. He was right at the center of the storm politically. He even claimed in one of his writings that he was in possession of all knowledge. You can't say that he was ignorant of the Christian concept. He obviously had some concept of Christianity and speaks of the Lord Jesus Christ, and yet he's a proponent of the New Atlantis concept. Just a very complicated character.
Bacon is known as the father of modern science and the grandfather of the English Enlightenment. The phrase, "knowledge is power," is often attributed to him and represents his philosophy, that through knowledge or science, mankind could transform himself and the world into its highest state of enlightenment. His dedication to science and learning led to the birth of England's premier scientific organization. When the Royal Society of England was formed in 1662, they named Bacon as their model and inspiration.
There's a book written by Thomas Sprat, who was the first president of the Royal Society. So this goes back to the early 1700s, and he wrote a history on it. And he acknowledged there that Francis Bacon was the originator of the idea.
Yet even beyond the Royal Society, 20th century historian Will Durant wrote that the whole tenor and career of British thought have followed the philosophy of Bacon, a philosophy brought to America and furthered by some of her most influential leaders. Thomas Jefferson considered Francis Bacon one of the three most important men in history, along with John Locke and Sir Isaac Newton. It is even said that Jefferson believed he was fulfilling Bacon's dream for a new Atlantis by founding the United States. As a result, nearly all Baconians credit Bacon with the founding of America. This painting, once owned by Baconian author Marie Bauer Hall, shows the North American continent with the spirit of Bacon rising from the midst. Above his head is the all-seeing eye of Horus in the midst of a triangle, while upon his cloak is the rose and cross, the symbol of his Rosicrucians. Despite these things, little is mentioned about Lord Bacon in the history books of America. There are no states, cities, towns, or schools named after him, which begs the question, other than Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, which of the founding fathers did he really influence?
Which of those founding fathers were most influenced by Bacon's work? I would suggest it was all those who were Freemasons.
Well, I think probably all the first presidents of America who were Freemasons, you could say, were influenced by him because of the influence that went into Freemasonry, but by Bacon. But I expect some were more influenced than others, or more inspired than others, and some may not even have known that Bacon was behind it all, in the sense of an inspirer. But maybe they all did. I mean, they were pretty intelligent men.
Bacon is considered by some to be the first Grand Master of modern Freemasonry. While the craft would not be officially established until after his death, it was Bacon who mapped out the plan for the ultimate aim of Masonry and all secret societies, the establishment of a new Atlantis. Peter Dawkins is the founder and president of the Francis Bacon Research Trust in England. He has dedicated more than 33 years to the study of Bacon, having written some 14 books about him, with titles such as Building Paradise and Francis Bacon, Herald of the New Age.
My research into the life and work of Francis Bacon and all those connected with him, which also takes me back into the wisdom traditions, which I'm very interested in, and into also things like the founding of America, the spread of modern science, and many other fascinating subjects. It's like a gateway into a huge wealth of information and knowledge for today.
Dawkins' work is supported by the Pro-Grand Master of English Masonry, the Marquis de Northampton. The Grand Master in England is Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent. Because he is a member of the royal family, Masonry allows Prince Edward to appoint someone to act in his place. As such, the Pro-Grand Master, Lord Northampton, is the acting head of all British Freemasonry. While he declined to be interviewed for this documentary, in his correspondence with our producer, he made it clear that he supports Dawkins' research and considers him an expert on Sir Francis Bacon. This is significant because the Northampton legacy dates back to the time of Bacon and Queen Elizabeth I. Today, Lord Northampton holds authority over Canonbury Tower, where Francis Bacon lived in his lifetime and where he is said to have met with his secret societies.
It's a fascinating building, and quite a lot of it's still left. It was once a big mansion house, and there's one wing of it left, and also a tower, which was at the end of another wing, which has disappeared. And this tower is known as Canonbury Tower. And the whole mansion itself was enlarged and decorated by a man called Sir John Spencer in Queen Elizabeth's time, and he'd had a year as Lord Mayor. He was quite an important guy in the City of London, and very, very wealthy merchant. And he had a home in London itself, and he also had Canonbury Mansion as his country home, because then it was in the country. Now it's just surrounded by London, part of London, but then it was in the country, up on a hill, and a wonderful place to go to get the country air, and good for your health. And Sir John Spencer was clearly involved with Freemasonry and the early Rosicrucian group, and he embellished all the rooms of the house with special carvings on the oak panelling, which have Masonic and Rosicrucian themes. And particularly the fireplaces are done very, very carefully and specially. But the Compton and Spencer rooms still have the original carved panelling in, and the carved fireplaces, full of Masonic and Rosicrucian themes. That was done by Sir John Spencer, and the carvings are dated around about 1598 to 1601, that period. Well, eventually the house was taken over by Francis Bacon when he was made Lord Keeper of the Great Seal and then Lord Chancellor, and he rented the house for the rest of his life. And it's during this time that what's called the Invisible College was founded, and many other things were done, and he's known to have carried out scientific experiments there. And it's quite clear too that the house was the perfect meeting place for his Rosicrucian group. It was a headquarters outside London. It was private in those days. It could be well protected out of prying eyes.
This labor of pursuing knowledge in secret represents Bacon's belief and method of working. In his New Atlantis, he wrote of a society that observed all things, but was known by no one. The symbolism of Bacon's home at Canonbury Tower, with all its mystery, supports the mystical view of the man, held by Dawkins himself.
Well, using sort of Eastern terms, I'd say he was a master, but what in India they call a real master. But he was here in Europe, in the UK, or in England at that time. And he was just an extraordinary being. I actually think that he was the one that Paracelsus made the prophecy about, called Elias the Artist, referring to Elijah. And in tradition, Elijah is said to come again and again to prepare people for the coming of the Messiah, or coming of the Christ, which has many different interpretations. And Bacon himself called himself the herald of the New Age, which is the title of Elijah.
The question posed by critics of Baconian theology is, what Christ did Bacon come to herald? Was it the Christ of the Bible, or the Christ of Masonry and the ancient mystery religion. In the ancient mysteries, a trinity is also recognized and is represented by a symbol that is little talked about, but one that some believe stands at the heart of all the